welcome to the first instalment in a new video series launched by TR Business earlier this year called Travel Retail Question Time, where you, the viewers, are in control of asking the questions. Our intrepid interviewee is Ramesh Cidambi, COO of Dubai Duty Free. On to our third question. What is Dubai Duty Free's approach to giving smaller, upcoming brands who perhaps have an interesting story to tell but not such a big budget an opportunity to shine within your airport offering?
That's another great question, and the answer the smaller brands may or may not like. If you think about brands at Dubai Duty Free, you have approximately 2,000 brands that we sell at the Duty Free. And 100 of the brands, the top 100 of the brands, contribute to about 60 to 62% of our sales. And these 2,000 brands contribute to 90% of our sales because the balance 10% is things like gold and other stuff which is not branded. So you have a substantial amount. So this year, for example, it could be about $1.3 billion, substantial amount of turnover coming from just 100 brands.
Wow.
Then you have another, let's pretend, 150 or so brands, which contribute another 15% of turnover. So now within 250 or 275 brands, you have essentially 75% of your turnover. So the balance brands that are there out of the 2,000, they contribute to less than 20% of your turnover. And even within that, more than 1,000 brands have sales of, let's say, between $100,000 to $300,000 a year. So you have a situation where in the top 100 brands, you have sales ranging from $4 million to $60 or $75 million in its apex. And at the bottom 1,000 brands, you have sales of around $100,000, $200,000. So it is a very skewed situation. And it has less to do with Dubai Duty Free as to do with the dominance of brands in general. Whether you are in domestic retail or whether you are in the travel retail industry, the industry has to accept the fact that certain brands are extremely strong and that certain brands dominate the retail landscape. Now, having said that, the other challenging part of this situation is that in many categories, like perfumes and cosmetics, like fashion, to some extent in technology, to some extent in confectionery and food, and to some extent in watches, you have a situation where brands have custom fit out in airports like ours, in travel retail locations. And what the custom fit out does effectively is that it helps the brand in terms of expression, it helps the brand in terms of merchandising, it improves the brand experience for the customers, but the disadvantage of it is that it is essentially fixed and it has a long life. So even if we were to have the notion that we can take smaller brands and experiment with smaller brands and increase the opportunities for the smaller brands in the airport, where am I going to do it? When you have so much of fixed fixturing across these major categories. So the reality of the situation is that in the current context, the strong brands and the bigger brands have got the footprint with the retailer, and they have got the mind share with the passengers to continue to be dominant. But I don't think that this is something that is forever. Nothing is forever. And I think the creative ways in which companies like Dubai Duty Free can work in is to give newer brands, let's say, for want of a better word, pop-up locations or temporary locations, and see if the brand has legs to give it a more permanent presence. And the fact is that if you have 2,000 brands, in Dubai Duty Free, we probably only had 150 or 200 new brand introductions last year, and the majority of them would have been in categories where it is easier to introduce a new brand. Like a classic example is liquor. In liquor, because of the way that liquor is merchandised, by the way that the products are displayed, you can introduce a new brand. Whereas in a category like fashion or perfumes or cosmetics, it is much harder to do it. So as much as we empathize and as much as we understand the difficulties that smaller brands have, The fact is that it is much harder for them to make their presence felt. Though there are examples, like for example, Apache, which is a confectionery brand that we sell, started off as a small brand, several years ago, and now are in a dominant position in the confectionery category. So you do have a few success stories, but new brand introductions typically are small in number and typically do not represent more than 1% of our turnover in any given year. And you have 100 brands that are 60% of our turnover. So it's a difficult situation.
I guess many of the viewers will be hanging on to that success story you mentioned, but there are success stories that are similar to that. That I think it's important for more retailers to take on board these lesser well-known brands and experiment, if nothing else, to provide something that the traveller hasn't seen before, even if they don't necessarily want to purchase anything from them at first. It is something new to them that they haven't seen before.
Absolutely.
Number 4. Does Dubai Duty Free see food and beverage taking more space in the airport in the future, or is traditional retail space still key? If so, are you likely to offer more affordable retail options to consumers in the future? Now, I think with this question, I think the person that's asking it is trying to get under the skin of retailers' justification for the luxury or high-end offer that they may prioritise in some locations, and perhaps food and beverage is becoming more popular and more successful because it's affordable and it's what travellers like to enjoy because, as I said, it's an affordable option. So that's, I guess, where they're referring to the affordable retail options as a possible idea. How would you answer this?
My first answer to that would be no. That we have no desire to see greater food and beverage, or an increase in the food and beverage component, because in effect, both the food and beverage part of the business, and the Dubai Duty Free, the retail business, are competing for the same amount of space. But it's not just a matter of competition for space. We think that within the different concourses that are there, and within especially the newer concourses, such as Concourse D or Concourse A, which were built in the last few years, the presence of food and beverage, in our view, is adequate. And in places where there is a genuine shortage of space, like in Terminal 2, for example, both the food and beverage aspect and the retail aspect are both challenged in terms of space. Is it a fact that in Terminal 2 you can use more F&B space? Yes, but it is equally a fact that in Terminal 2 we can use much more retail space. And what I would say to the person asking the question is, in the end, you also have to think about what is the revenue that you're generating per square meter. So Dubai Duty Free, for example, generates approximately $62,000 or $63,000 per square meter, across the arrivals and departures, and if you exclude landside and the other areas. But within that $63,000, there is substantial variation. So a concourse like Terminal 2, where space is so acutely constrained, our revenue per square meter is in excess of $100,000. And in a concourse like Concourse C, where the retail is evolving, where the passenger flow is starting to come with the takeover of the concourse by Emirates, and where the gates are under sort of an upgrading mode, you are at the other end at $20,000. You are at, let's say, approximately $60,000 a square meter in Concourse D, for example, where there is a good balance between food and beverage and retail. So I would say that from the point of view of what the customer wants, which is a good retail experience, and from the point of view of what Dubai Duty Free and the aviation sector wants, which is strong growth in terms of the revenue metrics and strong sales per square meter, I think we don't really have a great desire to see greater and greater food and beverage, space given for food and beverage. But the supplementary part of the question, and the one that you elaborated on in the beginning, which is the question of let us say, more affordable retail, I would also question the premise of that. And in spite of the sort of the fact that, we talk a lot about fashion brands, and we talk a lot about high-end brands and luxury brands or whatever, the fact is that, categories like that are less than 10% of our business, and categories like liquor, cigarettes, confectionery, delicatessen, watches, perfumes, cosmetics, some of the elements in that might be sort of closer to luxury, but for the main part, they can't really be classified as luxury or not affordable products. They would contribute to 85% of our business. So we are catering, in one sense, to the people who want affordable products, but we also have a bit of our business for someone who wants to buy a handbag for $5,000. No? But I think in an overall sense, I think the balance is pretty good at this point in time. And if in terms of expanding it to more affordability, it's really a conversation with the airport in terms of getting the additional retail space. But with the space that we have right now and with the demands on that space, I wouldn't see a big change in the near future.
Okay. On to the fifth and final question. You have survived to this point, so congratulations. So finally, what have you learned in the last year that will inform the company in the next year? And now I understand this question to be asking you personally, as opposed to you Dubai Duty Free. So please go ahead.
I think if you ask Mr. McLaughlin or team, they'll probably say that I learned very little. No, that last year, which informed me this year. But I think seriously and not so seriously, what I did learn was in business as in life, you have to be lucky. And the reason I say that is that we had a target of $2 billion last year in terms of turnover, and we hit the target on the 29th of December at 12:45 in the morning with about a day and a half or 2 days to spare. So in situations like that, you do realize the value of luck, and good fortune, which is needed. But equally, I think what I personally learned last year was that the changes that we want to make to the organization and the things that you want to see being done differently in some areas, like, for example, communicating with the customer, they are not easy to do within the context of a large team of people, of 6,000 employees that we have in our team, and within the context of a successful organization. So in some respects, when things are going well and when things are good and you are hitting your targets, as a company, you are winning awards, and so on, during that same time, to make some of the changes is actually harder than what people would sort of imagine. So I think the lesson that I learned in 2018 was that you have to push, you have to persevere, and you have to do the things that you need to do even when the external environment is generally positive, and as an organization that you're doing well, and continue to keep the momentum for that in 2019.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for being the first in our series, and I think you were the perfect choice. So yes, thank you again, and good luck for the rest of this
Thank
year.
you very much.
Lots and lots of luck.
And thanks very much for having me on this series. And best of luck for the series, and hope that the questions keep coming to you for the future people that you have on the series, and that it keeps the interest of the people in our industry.
Great.
Thank you.